What is up? It's Halsey with the Helicopter Podcast. And one of the things I love about doing the podcast is people reaching out and saying that they, follow the podcast. They listen to the podcast. They even recommend some guests I should have on the podcast. And usually what I try to do is like, hey, that's a great recommendation, but I also would like to have you on the show. So that's the scenario for today. And I'm joined by Chris Nelson. Chris, it looks like you're at work still. What's going on, pal?
Yeah, still at work here. I had a new guy start this week, and so I'm staying over to help him out, kind of get his footing. And yeah.
Well, that's nice of you. Excited to talk to you. You're not at a helicopter place of work right now because you're not necessarily in that business, but you're a helicopter owner. You own an Robinson R22. So I'm excited to talk about that. Of course, I can't forget to thank our partners over at Vertical Helicast for making the helicopter podcast possible. If you haven't checked out the Helicast platform put off by MHM Publishing yet, you totally should. It's my podcast, the Hangar Z podcast, and the Real Rescue with Jason Quinn. So let's just jump right into it. Chris, again, thank you for joining. Thanks for reaching out. Just out of curiosity, how did you discover my show? What was it about my show that you've enjoyed, and how did you come across it?
To be honest, I believe I was in the gym looking for some, something to listen to on the, old iPhone, and kind of was putting in like aviation type podcasts, trying to see what popped up, and sure enough, your podcast popped up and started. I think the first time I listened to you, you were on like episode 5, so you were really early on, yeah,
early adapter.
So I listened. Obviously, I started at number 1 and just kept working my way up. And every time I go to the gym, I'd see if you had another one on there. And if not, I'd wait for the next. And I'd listen to everyone. Sometimes it was like within an hour of you putting it out, I would be listening to it.
That's funny. I don't know if I could work out to my podcast, to be honest. I don't. I mean, I think it's a good podcast, of course, but I'm not sure it's like I don't know if it's going to get me amped. That's an interesting choice for workout entertainment, I should say.
Yeah, well, I've naturally been a bigger guy most of my life, and so starting off flying in an R44, knowing I needed to lose some weight to try and get in the R22 and save some money. Listening to your podcast was a good way to do that and kind of motivator, to listen to like-minded people and kind of drive me to keep going.
Oh man. Well, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you, listening to the show, and I'm glad that you were able to join. A lot of the conversations that I have with people obviously are individuals that are professional helicopter pilots, guys and gals that have, been within the industry for quite a while and do some pretty cool things. But one of the areas that I'm lacking is talking to guys like yourself that maybe have full-time other careers, but are, passionate about helicopters and helicopter aviation. I don't actually know your long-term goals. Maybe your goals are to get in as a career, and I guess we could talk about that. But give us just a little bit of background on, what sparked your interest in helicopters, and what led you to purchase your own helicopter. Like you said, you now have an R22 Beta 2.
Yeah, so it started off really early on, like a lot of guys. I actually took a helicopter ride at an air show with my dad when I was about 6 years old, and that kind of sparked my interest. And then, of course, we were into a lot of other things, ATVs, dirt bikes. We had a horse farm and stuff growing up, and so just did that. But it always is in the back of my mind. And then I joined the Army in 2007, deployed to Afghanistan. I was in Afghanistan 2008, 2009, and we flew helicopters everywhere. So I was either in a Chinook or a Black Hawk. We flew all over. I was stationed in RC Central, which was basically Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan. And we were in charge of several provinces in that area, and it was just easier to get on a helicopter and fly there. So did that. Probably, I don't know, I probably flew in 40 or 50 missions on helicopter, so quite a few. And came home, didn't really know what I wanted to do, bounced around a little bit here, a little bit there, and finally found my footing in a career in the corrugated box industry. And then, just kind of lost track of time a little bit, like most people do in their late 20s, early 30s. And finally kind of set my mind on getting back to focusing on aviation and particularly helicopters. And in October 2022, I told my sister, I said, hey, this is something that's been burning in me. I want to do it. And luckily, there's a little flight school over here in Lansing, Illinois called Summer Skies. And walked in there, said, hey, I want to do a introductory flight. They said, no problem. And their head CFI 2 got into, we got into the R44 and took a intro flight. And I was hooked at that point. I was like, sign me up, take my money. So.
Nice. Yeah, those demo flights are dangerous, Chris. Flight schools know that, right? A good demo flight could cause, I always kind of joke my first, I started with airplanes and I never thought helicopters were obtainable. I talked about it on the show several times about this idea of like, helicopters were meant for the military, and those are, the guys and gals flying helicopters are probably military trained. And, come to find out now that I've been in the civilian helicopter world for a long time, it's actually kind of really the opposite. Most helicopter pilots are civilian trained. Obviously, there's a lot of military trained pilots that enter the civilian world. But by and large, a lot of those guys and gals maybe end up flying airplanes, or they choose a whole different career path. I have friends that flew helicopters in the Army, and they do something completely different now that they're outside of the Army. So, but I did a demo flight, and I got lucky, man. The gal, shout out Lisa Davis, my first CFI. I think she was like a new CFI, and the demo flights at Hillsborough were supposed to be like, a 0.3, 18 minutes flight time, whatever, have it be there. And she ended up, I think I was gone for nearly an hour, and that included landing downtown Portland on the heliport there. And same situation at the end of that demo flight. It was like hook, line, and sinker. Sign me up. Where do I pay? So, those demo flights can be dangerous, and but for the right reasons, of course, it gets us more excited. I'm familiar with those folks actually at the flight school. I'm pretty sure I sold them a helicopter last year, right?
Yeah, you sold them R44 Alpha Foxtrot. Yep.
Nice. Yeah. From down from Florida, right?
Yeah, great little ship. We timed it out and put it through the 12-year inspections and got it back up, and she's flying again now.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a very small world. I've been selling aircraft now for full time for almost 4 years, in total probably about 6 years, and you end up, especially in the Robinson world, working with a lot of the same people, or at least talking and interacting with a lot of Robinson owner operators. So that's kind of a neat connection that you and I have, that you go to that school. So your flying started just last year. I mean, October of 2022. I'm not much for math, but I mean, you're like a year and a few months into it, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So I started there with working full time. It was kind of like, okay, this is going to be like on the weekends, maybe late evening type of thing. And so started flying about every other week. And it just took time, trying to learn to hover. Again, being a bigger guy, I had to be in the R44. So the expense of that's, a little bit more than the 22. So that was harder to justify spending, that much more money. So I took more time at it, and kind of spaced it out a little bit more, and got up to about 37 hours in the R44, and kind of plateaued. Realized that I wasn't flying enough, I think, regularly, and it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, just kind of this back and forth where I didn't feel like I was gaining anything. So at that point, again, I was working full time and kind of realized that maybe taking some time off of work and really focusing on my private pilot rating was the right thing to do, and told my family what I wanted to do. They supported that. And about middle of August, I left my job and jumped in head first pretty much. I researched, good flight schools in the area across the United States. Kind of stumbled across Jerry Trimble Helicopter out in McMinnville, Oregon, and called those guys up, and they were phenomenal. And they said, we'll help you with whatever you need. Just get out here. And so I packed up the car, drove out there, and the end of August I got there and met with Allison and Jerry, and they told me, kind of what they do and how to go about it. And they have a really good formula for success out there. And so kind of jumped in head first with those guys. And within 2 weeks, I had my private pilot rating. So it was a very quick transition there. Did my check ride in the
That's
R44.
Cool.
And they had a great DPE out there that's out there regularly. And so got through. My downfall there, like most, was just the ground school portion of it. And so they got me up to speed on that, and got the time I needed, and we got it done.
That's awesome. Did you do your check ride with Ron?
I did, with Ron. Yep.
Nice.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
I've known Ron for a very long time, but it's been many, many years since we've collaborated. Back in the day when I was the assistant chief at Hillsborough, I had to schedule check rides. And he wasn't someone that was available a ton. So I didn't do a ton of work with him, but we certainly had a lot of interactions, and certainly know really good things about Ron. So that's cool. Fun fact about McMinnville, I got married at the Air and Space Museum right across from the airport there.
Yeah, awesome.
Where the Spruce Goose is housed. So fun fact about McMinnville. And very familiar with Jerry and Allison and the entire team out there. They've been around for a very long time. And yeah, they certainly do have their formula for success. So that's cool. Was there a reason that you chose to go out there and not stick with the flight school that you were with?
I really just kind of wanted to get away from the Midwest a little bit, kind of disconnect from home. And the one thing that really attracted me to them, besides just them being, a great school and having a lot of good references, to go there, they had housing, for the students. So Jerry and Allison have connections within the local area, McMinnville, and they have a couple of houses that they rent out the rooms. And actually, one of their prior instructors had bought a house there in town a few years ago, and it was very easy transition. They gave me the code to the house, moved me in, and that was it. So it was really good to have that. I was really worried about going out there and having to sign a lease with somebody, and deposits and money, and not really knowing how long I was going to be there. And they were just like, "Yeah, we'll take care of you. Stay as long as you want."
Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah, actually, my first student ever is a guy named Jean-Frédéric Stefan. Excuse me, my French is lacking. And Jean was actually in the States a couple months ago, and he was coming back. He was at Jerry Trimble doing, I think he was doing his ATP. Okay. Much cheaper to do his ATP over here. And then he ended up back in Europe, and he was actually talking about the housing situation and how nice that was and how easy it was. So, obviously flight schools are incentivized to make the process hopefully easy. With your flight training, I don't know how it works at Jerry Trimble, but did you guys get to do like a lot of off airports and things, kind of in the coastal range between McMinnville and the beach?
We did a little bit. I actually did a 5-hour turbine transition course with Jerry himself, and in their MD 500, and so we were able to do more off airport stuff with him and with that helicopter. The R22s, they really like to just kind of stay close to home or between there and like Salem. Locally, kind of more focused on just the training aspect. Of the flight school.
Yeah, I one of the things I loved about training in the Northwest was we did so many cool off airports. Something that I think I kind of took for granted at the time, and now looking back at it, like I would pay probably money to go out and be able just to go and do the off airports and all the cool stuff that we did out there at Hillsboro back in the day, and just a really fun, great area. And again, like I said, McMinnville is where I got married. I grew up like 45 minutes from McMinnville, so that's cool. I didn't realize that you had gone out to Jerry Trimble, so that's pretty exciting to hear. When did you decide that it would be a good idea to buy your own helicopter?
So I had always kind of dreamed of the idea of buying my own helicopter. I think like most people do. And
really, do most people?
I hope most people do, and maybe it was just me.
I mean, shoot, I sell helicopters and fly them. I don't even know if I dream about it, to be honest. I don't know if I'm up for that type of punishment.
Yeah. I always dreamed and thought that it would be something I would love to accomplish someday. I didn't quite realize that it would be and happen as fast as it did, basically finishing my private pilot. And I pretty much left Jerry Trimble and drove to where the helicopter was in central Missouri. So I left there. I finished up there with about 17 hours of instrument training and kind of got to a point where I knew that I could go back to my home flight school and be able to finish everything that I needed to out there. So on the way home, I found a gentleman that was selling a 2006 Robinson R22 Beta 2. Had about 1,300 hours left on it on the 2,200 hour, and it had 3 years left on the 12-year. And so I called him up. I said, I'm driving from Oregon. You're between, Oregon and Illinois. So I'll drive down and check it out, and we'll fly it around and see what happens. And so I got down there about a day and a half later and met with him and checked the helicopter out. Everything looked good, from my perspective, and we flew it. Everything went well. It was a very clean little helicopter, and scheduled a pre-inspection, and then went down there. We made an agreement, went down there and picked it up about 2 weeks later.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you did a pre-buy. Obviously, I think sometimes when people are newer to buying helicopters, they might treat it kind of more like buying a car,
Right.
from a used car, and maybe not do the full due diligence. So I'm glad that you did a pre-purchase inspection on it. That's important for not just physical aircraft discrepancies, but also paperwork and audit and make sure the records, as we all know, records are so important. So that's pretty neat. How long ago was that then when you bought the aircraft?
That was about October 20th, I think. So yeah, it's been about 8 weeks now or so.
Okay, so fairly new into helicopter ownership. What has that been like? I've actually personally never owned. I've owned helicopters for hours before.
Okay.
12 hours here, very short time. But I've never actually officially owned and operated my own aircraft. What has that experience been like for you?
So it's been a learning process, definitely. Pretty much starting all the way from the pre-buy inspection, learning how that all works and what they do, and why I'm paying this much money, for what they're, giving me. And so it's been a learning experience. It's been great. The helicopter checked out pretty well. The only thing I had to do was I had to get home and get the transponder re-inspected. That was the only thing that, was a discrepancy and a question in the logbooks of kind of where and when and how much time I had left. So came home, got it inspected down in Indianapolis at Freedom Helicopters. They took care of me real quick in a couple of hours. And then, just kind of dug into the logbooks pretty deep and really learned and tried to understand the history of the helicopter. Once I got it home, kind of one of the things I did is I just looked people up that had previously owned it and called them. One being Jimmy Garce down at Sevier County Choppers. He actually owned this helicopter. He did the 4,400 hour on it back in 2014. And I called him up and he's like, man, I can't believe you own this helicopter. It's a great ship. You know, it's kind of a personal prized possession of mine, he said. At one point, this aircraft had glass panels put in it. That didn't last very long. They really weren't a high quality glass panel. And so he put them in. He sent it down to Florida for a period of time. They flew it, and then it got sold to the gentleman in Ohio. And then the glass panels started failing. And so he just put a traditional instrument panel back in it. Got a couple of Garmin G5s in it and the 430 WAS. And so it's a full on instrument ship.
That's awesome.
So
hey, I want to talk more about your helicopter ownership.
Like I said, dove into the logbooks, got the ship, to a point where we were flying it pretty much every day. Did a good, wash on it and wax and cleaned everything up and started flying. And there for 6 weeks or so, we were flying 4 or 5 days a week, just trying to build time with my instructor by myself, and just going. Kind of, we'd wake up in the morning, do a pre-flight, figure out where we were going, and head there. Have lunch or whatever, and head back. So got about right now. I just did a 50-hour inspection on it. So met with the mechanic doing that, the A&P mechanic, and he went through it with me, everything that needed to be done. We changed the oil, we inspected the spark plugs, we went through all the checks that needed to be done, and everything checked out great, and he signed off on it, and we're ready for another 50 hours. So that was a good learning experience.
Rocking and
but
rolling.
Really just kind of progressing in my flight training and keep growing as a pilot.
Thank you to our sponsor, Robinson Helicopter Company, the choice for unrivaled safety and reliability, so you can accomplish any mission with confidence. For more than half a century, Robinson has been at the forefront of the helicopter industry. From the R22 to the R66 turbine, Robinson makes helicopters accessible so more people can accomplish more missions. Climb higher. For additional information, visit www.robinsonheli.com.
Thank you to our sponsors for making the Helicopter Podcast possible. We, of course, appreciate you. As a reminder, I'm talking to Chris Nelson. Chris is a little bit of a different guest than we typically chat with. He's newer into helicopters. He owns his own helicopter, which I think is super cool. One of the things that you talked about, Chris, that I felt like kind of circling back to was the speed and the pace of training. Whereas, I've seen this in the past when I was flight instructing, when you're privately funding your training and you have a full-time job on top of it, it can be challenging, especially during the private, to, be able to get done what you need to get done. Flying every other weekend or once a week can make it very challenging. And so I think it's neat that you recognize that. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't always fully understand that or see that. And you end up flying more hours because you're just not able to kind of get that repetitiveness going of being able to get that muscle memory. Was that kind of a difficult decision for you to make, to kind of decide to step away from work for a little bit, step away from family? I mean, those are big life decisions.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was nothing that I took lightly, that's for sure. Again, a long conversation with family. I have a 10-year-old son, so taking time away from him to kind of chase a dream of mine, was not something that was easy to do. Luckily, he's a great kid and he understood, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, go do it, be successful." So that's what I did. But yeah, it definitely was a a transition going from, working every day, 5-6 days a week. And then, okay, now I've got this new focus. And so kind of had to prep for heading out to Oregon. But once I got there and I got in the routine, McMinnville Airport is very active airport. And so that was kind of a learning experience for the first 3 or 4 flights. Just because at any time you could have 7 to 8 helicopters in the airspace, a couple fixed wing guys. And so you're always having your head on a swivel, trying to, see where everybody's at, listen to everybody on the radio. So that was definitely a challenge. But kind of one of the biggest things that I realized is that if I was going to commit to this 100%, I knew I just needed to do it. And that was part of the reason why I purchased the helicopter, as well as I seen firsthand, whether it was at my personal home flight school or at Jerry Trimble, that with all of the students that are coming and going and the helicopters and maintenance downtime, the calendar and the schedule would get very busy very quickly. And so I got it was tough to be limited to those blocks of hours, those 2-hour blocks, 3-hour blocks. And so I knew that, if I really wanted to do this the right way, it was to own my own aircraft, and then I could essentially fly as much as I wanted, and bring that control back in myself. And as long as I, do the maintenance on the helicopter, and everything was done there and done by the books and FAA standards, I would schedule time with the instructor when she was available. But the rest of the time, if it was nice out, I would just go fly from airport to airport and gain that, single pilot, training that I really needed to, familiarize myself with and get better at. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's awesome. I've known a lot of people that have chosen to purchase an aircraft specifically for training. If you're able to afford it, it's actually kind of works out to be a little more economical. And again, you can work on your own schedule. You're not having to battle all the other students for the limited flight blocks and things like that. So I definitely see the merit in that. And you're certainly not the first person I know that done that. And, I think it's a cool idea, if you can afford it. So I think that's neat that you took that avenue. Since you're so recent in training, I kind of like to hear from your perspective some of the difficult parts of your training, other than, of course, obviously there are some time gaps and that probably made things. We've kind of talked about that, but was there other portions of your training that you found difficult? And, what were you able to do to kind of mitigate some of those difficulties in order to accomplish getting your certificate?
Yeah, so I would say probably one of the most difficult things, the flying side of it was relatively easy. You get on, you schedule your time to fly, you meet with the instructor, you fly, and you go home. The hardest part was really making it a point to make sure that I did the ground school and the ground instruction. And that always seemed to be the hardest for everybody. So that was probably one of the most difficult parts for me, was making sure that I was doing enough ground school regularly, not only to learn it, but then to retain it. So whether it was with my at-home flight school, Jerry Trimble was really big on hammering hard on the ground school, and we did a lot of that. I actually did more ground school there than I flew, because going there, I knew I was behind on my ground school. And so you just really gotta buckle down on the books and study hard, and it'll pay off. So that was probably my biggest struggle, was just getting up to speed on the ground school.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you and a lot of people, including myself, in fact, I think I've talked about it on my podcast before, that the ground portion is the part of flight training that's not fun, right? You have this idea, you're 6 years old, you do your first demo, then as an adult, you take another demo, you're all amped to fly helicopters. Yeah. Not so amped to open up the FAR aim and try to distinguish, how legal people write things and
Right.
and trying to understand different, terminologies. It's all very difficult, in fact, especially when you're coming into it without, any aviation background. So I think it's a good point for our listeners. If you're just getting into your training, don't neglect the ground. In fact, I think that many times the ground is what actually helps keep you safe. Certainly keep you out of trouble, right? Understanding, Part 91 and the different ways that you can lose your ticket is really important. But aerodynamics wise, like aerodynamic hazards, right? It's one thing to be able to, okay, what is LTE, right? And, it's one thing to be able to rattle off just like the verbal definition,
Right.
but actually fully grasping it and understanding it and, kind of being able to actually know when you could potentially put yourself into a position of LTE. Maybe not so prevalent in the R22, which, has a pretty effective tail rotor. But, you start flying in a jet ranger or a long ranger, you're heavy, you're hot, you're taking off, you have a left crosswind, you're pulling a lot of power. Automatically, you should start thinking, am I putting myself into a position that I could, have LTE coming in on approach? Same with settling with power. So I think that it's not the fun stuff, but it's so important. And it's one thing that I see that I saw when I was instructing that would hold students up was studying the ground portion. And I know it certainly was definitely the slow portion. If flight training just consisted of flying, I would have finished my training in like 6 months. But unfortunately, there's so much ground involved. So it took me almost 2 years to get through, my CFI. Yeah. So now that you've finished your private, you own your own aircraft, are you trying to make a career out of this? What's your plan?
Potentially. I don't really know the answer to that yet. Right now, I'm just focusing on getting through my ratings and being successful at that. I actually have my commercial written scheduled in 2 weeks. And then hopefully we'll have my DP scheduled here in the next month to do my check ride for commercial. I'm about halfway done with instrument, owning my instrument R22. To get to that last 20 hours I need shouldn't be very difficult. Luckily, my local flight school, they just had a CFI II start. So him and I will be able to go up and my helicopter will be able to knock that 20 hours out pretty quick. And then I actually, the end of May, I have a 1 week CFI program scheduled back out with Jerry Trimble. So he does a 40-hour crash course for CFIs, and everybody says it's a great course that he puts on, and more advanced maneuvers and things like that. And so I'm looking forward to going out there as well. But I would love to see myself someday become a Part 135 EMS news helicopter pilot. I'd love to potentially go out to the Grand Canyon like you did as well. It's all kind of up in the air right now, with having a son. I'm focused on work and him and flying when I can.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, that's hard, right? The life work balance, the life helicopter balance can be very challenging. And, if you have kids or a wife or a partner, whatever it may be, just kind of makes the situation a little bit more difficult. But the cool thing is that you decided to do something about it, right? You're flying helicopters. How old are you?
37. Be 38 here in a couple weeks.
37, turning 38. Took your first demo flight as a little guy. And, last year you decided for whatever reason that it was time to, take care of yourself a little bit, do things that you want to do. And I think that's neat. I think that there's actually a lot of people in the helicopter world that have worked a complete other career, essentially have already worked a career's worth at some type of other industry, but always had this kind of yearning passion to learn how to fly. And because of that, they make a career change. Whether it's a good idea or not, I don't know. It's all up to the individual, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people, the helicopter career presents a very challenging work-life balance, especially in the beginning. For some people, it works really well. I had a gal on who now flies for Columbia, and I think she made a big career change, engineer at at Chevron, I think, and then jumped into
Yeah.
helicopters and works month on, month off. Conveniently, her husband is also a pilot at the same company, and they have the same schedule, month on, month off. So, I mean, that kind of situation works out really well. But I think it's hard for a lot of people. And I would suggest to my listeners out there that, you know, if you're a little bit, I don't want to say older, you know, I'm 35, you're 38. That's not too old, right? But if you've already worked, you know, 15, 20 years in another career and you're thinking about helicopters, I would really do your research, you know, and make sure that you kind of have a full understanding of what the career path is. And I think with all the resources that are out there today, people are able to learn so much, right? Just by watching YouTube videos. Heck, there's even a podcast. It's called the Helicopter Podcast. Every once in a while, we have good tidbits of information that, you know, hopefully help people out. Is there anything specific about the podcast that you've taken away, something that helped you with your training, something that, you know, caused you to make a decision?
I really think just having the well-rounded different individuals on your podcast has really helped me kind of narrow, you know, where I potentially want to go. I mean, you've done a great job at finding different people, EMS world, you know, people that are flying for Columbia, you know, putting out forest fires overseas and here in the States. And so listening to you guys, you know, talk and do your podcast has been great to really kind of formalize my own opinion and kind of then do more research and figure out kind of the route I want to go. So my main thing is just being patient. I try to exercise being patient as much as I can. It's hard sometimes, but just being patient and I'll get there when I get there. You know, main thing is just continue to fly safely and, you know, I'll get the ratings as they come.
Yeah, no, it's a good outlook. It's a good way to take it and one step at a time, you know, and never say no to an opportunity. And it sounds like you're going to get your CFI. So that will be a good first place for you to start, you know, maybe even providing instruction in your helicopter. Something like that could maybe allow you to get hours and help you cover some of the expense, leasing it back to a flight school. I mean, there's so many cool options that you can do. And by having your own aircraft, you certainly open the door to a lot of those different options. Anything during your training that scared you? Anything while flying that made you pucker a little bit, a learning lesson, something maybe that you weren't expecting, or maybe just an overall maneuver that made you more nervous than you know, you thought it would?
Yeah, I will say my first auto was quite interesting. I am not a fan of roller coasters. And so, you know, I probably was 4 or 5 hours into it. And my instructor said, okay, you know, let's do an auto so you can kind of see how that feels and understand what's going on, because there's a lot of things happening in a short amount of time. And so I said, okay, great. He said, just kind of follow with me. And he took the controls. And I think my head hit the roof of the helicopter, you know, and we got down and I was like, I think we need to call it a day. Like, I just needed some time to understand what just happened, you know, and, you know, he did a great job as an instructor and there was nothing unsafe about it. I just was totally not expecting, you know, what was going to happen and you know, literally shutting power off and, you know, gliding to a spot on the runway. So it was definitely you know, kind of an eye-opening moment. So
that's interesting. Now, I don't want to throw shade at your flight instructor, but there might be better ways to introduce an auto, right? I would say if the collective is going down so fast that you're knocking your head on top, you know, that's probably kind of a scary way to introduce the maneuver. You know, one of the things that I always taught when I taught CFI training was that introducing a maneuver like an auto rotation, especially, you can make it really a chill event. You know, in fact, I would usually start by, you know, going out to the practice area, climbing up to a couple thousand feet, and essentially just slowly lowering the collective and keeping the throttle on and just saying, okay, hey, look, I mean, the collective's down and we're in descent. This is very similar to how we can expect it to be in the aircraft. And then you kind of gradually work into lowering collectives all the way down. You're giving your pedal input. Now you slowly roll off. I think that's, take it for what it is. But maybe when you're teaching people, you can remember that experience. And again, not throwing shade at your CFI, but I always did things a little bit different because for me, auto rotations was a scary thing.
Yeah.
You don't know what to expect. You don't know what it's going to feel like. And as humans, if you have a negative experience on something from the very beginning, that's what you remember most. And so I think it's important, and something that you can consider when you start teaching people, is that ease people into maneuvers. Make sure that you're not scaring them because that could then inhibit their progress in autos moving forward. Just my 2 cents. What do I know? Here I am on my soapbox being a Monday morning quarterback. But, it's I think it's an interesting thought and maybe something, that will stick with you as you start teaching. I think that's really important, right? It's when you're teaching someone, you can look back at your training. What did I like? What did I didn't like? Things that, maybe you can do differently. So, One thing
that I'm glad I was able to do was fly with several different instructors. And so I was able to take, some things that might not have been so great with one instructor and then have another one that was good at that. And even sometimes it was just as simple as somebody explaining something a little bit differently. I just wasn't quite getting it, with the way they were explaining it or the way they were showing. And I'd go spend an hour with another instructor, and before you know it, I had that maneuver figured out. So that was definitely a big benefit for me going through my training.
Yeah, it's really cool. I want to talk a little bit more about training, but real fast, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Hillsboro Heli Academy. Embark on your helicopter pilot journey with Hillsboro Heli Academy. Known worldwide, they make it easy to achieve both U.S. and European helicopter licenses. Visit flyhaa.com to schedule your introductory flight and turn your dream into a career.
As always, thanks to our sponsors for making the Helicopter Podcast possible. Chris, you're part of the reason I have sponsors now, because people actually listen. You listen when you work out, so I appreciate that. It's pretty cool. In fact, we're gaining more sponsors. PAG is signed up. Robinson Helicopters is signed up. Of course, Bell Helicopters has been sponsoring us as well. Celicopter, which, a business that I care a lot about because I own it. We're also a proud sponsor. So I think it's pretty neat. Big shout out to our sponsors. Interesting. It's funny to think that you're so in it right now, this training. It's a long time for me. It's many, many eons ago that I was in a training position or learning how to fly. So it's always kind of fun to talk with guys that are at your stage, because it's all still new. It's all very fresh. You guys have a different perspective, and it kind of allows me to reminisce of the good old days. I like what you said about switching it up with instructors. And I think, depending on the flight school, again, I can only really give my flight school experience at Hillsboro, but sometimes students were kind of reluctant to speak up. They didn't want to hurt their instructor's feelings. They didn't want to cause ripples, whatever it may be. But sometimes it's not about being a bad instructor. It's about maybe you're just not the right instructor for that specific person. Just like any learning situation, right? I mean, everyone learns differently. As a CFI, it's really nice to be adaptable, so you can try to fit within whatever box your student needs you to fit in, but it's not always possible. So I think it's cool that you've had that experience and been able to fly with other people. Not only can it kind of stop that plateau. In fact, I think in FOI is something that we used to talk about, is the easiest way to stop a plateau in training is to put a new instructor and see if you can't get that going again. So I think that's neat that you did that. And you get to have, everyone does something a little bit different, right? Someone, may teach something one way. You're able to learn a little bit differently from everyone else, which I think can make you a more well-rounded pilot. How many different instructors have you had a chance to fly with?
Out at Jerry Trimble, I was with 3 different instructors. And then at my home school, I've been with 3 different instructors as well.
Yeah, so I mean, 6 different people. I mean, that's actually a lot. And given that you're not even through your commercial yet, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's actually really neat. Sometimes it can be a little frustrating if the instructors aren't having good communication, because you might end up kind of going backwards or
Sure.
going through something that maybe you already have done. But by and large, typically being able to fly with different people is really cool. So for our listeners out there, if you're in a position right now where you're at a bit of a plateau, uh, consider requesting a change in instructor. And it doesn't have to be a forever change. It could be, hey, I want to go fly with this other instructor for 3 or 4 hours, maybe get through some of this. You have to advocate for yourself when you're going through flight school. If you don't speak up, no one's going to advocate for you. So, I think that's cool. Is you having different instructors caused by you, or was it just kind of the way your training worked out to where they just kind of shuffled you around a bit?
No, so out at Jerry Trimble, I had my primary instructor, and then they would also do stage checks. And so I would go and fly with other instructors just to validate that I was at, the stage that I was ready to take my check ride. So I was with my primary there, and then 2 other instructors. And then back at home, I had my primary instructor, and then I would fly with the CFI, double I. And he is the one that really helped me get to a good level to be hovering well. Him as a double I, he had obviously more experience, and so he was again able to kind of explain it to me a few different ways and really get my hovering under control and be able to progress my hovering to where it is today. And then my 3rd instructor at home, she's a new instructor, new CFI, and she's who I did primarily most of my R22 training with before I went to Jerry, and then also after with the new helicopter. And then she even flew down there with me to pick up my helicopter as well. So.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's fun. How long was that ferry? Not too long from Missouri?
Yeah, we left Lebanon, Missouri, and it was about 4.4 hours.
Nice.
So, yeah,
not too bad.
Yeah, it was
what did that maiden flight feel like, flying your own helicopter home?
It was a little nerve-wracking for about the first hour, just because unexpected noises and things you're hearing, you're not used to that helicopter. And the last 3.5 hours, we were just cruising. We had to stop about every 100 miles, again, with me being a bigger guy. And then I had her as a flight instructor. We had to watch careful with our weight and balance on the R22. So we'd go about 100 miles.
Awesome. Now, we didn't really talk about this in a pre-interview or anything, so you can tell me it's none of my business, but I do have other individuals that are maybe interested in purchasing a helicopter, and maybe they don't know that there's different avenues or different ways to do that. How did you go about purchasing the aircraft? Was that something that you were just able to save up for and buy outright? Did you utilize financing?
No. So, it was kind of one of those things where I've worked really hard in my younger years, and I just saved up for it. I was very fortunate 7 or 8 years ago to back when the housing market wasn't what it is today, to pick up some rental properties. And so I purchased 4 or 5 rental properties and have rented those out. And then as the market got better, I sold them off and was able to kind of stockpile some cash. And this purchase and my helicopter training was really kind of the first investment in myself that I've ever done. So I knew at 37, 38 years old, again, if I was going to do it, I needed to do it now. And so I paid cash for it. That in itself was, kind of a long process just to make sure that I was doing it. I was going to be successful. So setting up a timeline of how long I was going to own this aircraft, what it was going to cost me in that time, to operate it. I knew that I wanted to keep it somewhere in the ballpark of like 300 to 500 hours. I was hoping to potentially get that done in about a year's time, maybe a year and a half, potentially leasing it to a flight school later on to burn off the rest of those hours that it had left, or to pass it on to the next guy that was looking to build hours. So there's a lot of thought and math you got to put into that. You know, I'm operating in the ballpark of about $200 a flight hour right now. So when you look at that compared to renting one from a flight school, it's a pretty good savings. But on the back end, you know, what I saved hour by hour is taking off of the value of the aircraft. So, you know, I had to figure that out, and I knew that I needed to buy into the right aircraft at the right price, you know, knowing that there was going to be still some sort of resale value there on the end.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, it seems like you're a very intelligent guy. You've put yourself in the right position to be financially successful, to purchase a helicopter, taking advantage of the real estate market. Something that you said that I love is that it's the first time, you know, that you invested in yourself. This has nothing to do with helicopters, and maybe I've used the platform to talk about this before. I feel like I have, but I think about it all the time, is that in school, typically they don't even talk about investing, or at least at my school, you don't really learn about investing in things. But I feel like if you were to learn about it, whether it's in high school or college, they're teaching you investments like real estate, the stock market, hard money lending, you know, you name it, you can put your money somewhere and it can work for you. And that's cool. Those are great investments. But the best investment, in my opinion, is the investment in yourself. When I decided to invest in myself 4 years ago and go full-time with my business, it's been the greatest return that I'll ever have on any investment. Even if it all ends tomorrow, I've done so much, not just financially, but mentally, you know, being able to know that, you know, I was able to be a business owner, able to sustain and run a business and pay employees and pay myself, and have a little bit of more financial freedom than I ever really could have, I think, as a helicopter pilot. So kudos to you for investing in yourself, because I think America is great for so many things, but I think we fall short in educating people that you should invest in yourself, because investing in yourself, I think, will always yield the highest returns. And for you, that might look like a new career. That might look like, 10 years from now, you may be making a very good salary, flying very, very cool helicopters, in a corporate side or in the Gulf, or flying air medical. Or it might be that you continue just to have a helicopter that you teach people in, and you still have your full-time job, but it's something that opens up doors and avenues to other things. So I guarantee it's an investment that's going to pay off. So kudos to doing that, because it's scary to do.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It definitely is. There's no doubt about it.
I think it's a good example too for your 10-year-old, right? I think being able to show someone at a young age that it's okay to invest in yourself, and it's also okay to follow your dreams, right? Unfortunately, as adults, dreams get squashed real fast, right?
Yeah.
Everything's all butter and gravy until you're about 18, or at least it was for me. A very privileged life growing up. And then you turn 18, and man, things change, and they change quickly. And those hopes, those goals, those dreams, they kind of diminish. So I think it's really neat talking to you, because I think that there's probably other people listening to the podcast right now that are right on the fringe of making that decision. And maybe, seeing you and your success will help them do that. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Nothing to do with helicopters, but I think it's a cool thing, and to put yourself in the position that you put yourself in. So congratulations on that. Before we wrap it up here, I have no affiliation with Helicopter Online Ground School. You connected me with Kenny. In fact, the podcast we've recorded, and actually, awesome. By the time this again, I have no affiliation. and I never used helicopter online ground school myself because I don't really think it was around when I was training. But has that been a useful tool for you?
It has, yeah. So when I was out at Jerry Trimble, that was kind of, when I wasn't in classroom setting with the instructor, that is what I primarily used at home, on my own. And so it was really nice to just be able to have that at my fingertips on the computer. And, there's so many videos and so much useful information on there that you're able to just, sit down, watch. Maybe you got to watch it 10 times, but, everybody learns differently. And so I would sit there, and if there was something I just wasn't getting, a lot of it was aerodynamics. It took me a while to really wrap my head around aerodynamics and how they all kind of work with each other. And his videos were able to make that happen. And then after that, I, went in and changed from his private pilot courses into the commercial courses. And now I'm doing the same thing at home as well as going through all his commercial videos. And so.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I think it's the more self-study that you can do, you're going to save money. Obviously, having the helicopter online ground school comes at a fee, but, speaking with Kenny on the podcast, it seems like the fee is kind of, really equates to probably about 1 hour of what you would pay for just a CFI. Yep. And again, no affiliation. I'm not getting paid to talk about it. But I think it's a neat concept, and I think it's a cool tool, and a great way to subsidize. I think for me, that would have been really helpful because sometimes it's hard to get done with the ground, go home, and then try to recreate or try to understand what the heck your instructor just taught you. I remember like the symmetry of lift. It's so obvious to me now, but man, in the beginning, I was like, what? Like, what? Yeah. No, this doesn't make any sense. So to be able to go and kind of subsidize your learning, I think is a way to, be successful. Well, Chris, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you being a listener. I appreciate you reaching out. If you are like Chris and you listen to the podcast while you're working out or whenever you choose to listen to the podcast, I would love to hear from you. One of the surprises of doing the podcast is people reaching out, people saying hi, sharing feedback, asking questions. I try to get back in a timely manner. Chris, was I timely with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, good. He's lying. It probably took like 3 weeks. I paid him to say I was timely. I try to respond. Podcasting isn't my full-time thing, obviously, but it's something that I love doing, and had no idea that people would reach out. So I think it's cool. And Chris, I'm glad that you found the podcast to be productive. And I think that your episode here could end up being very productive for listeners that are maybe thinking of a second career, maybe haven't pulled the trigger on making that decision yet. Or maybe they're younger individuals and they're getting into training and they thought they were going to break up their training a little bit. Maybe you've now enticed them to keep that pace, keep that intensity, because that's so important in helicopter training. But, I appreciate you coming on. Any parting words, Chris, of wisdom of, you've been in the helicopter industry a short time, but you've been doing it. You own your own helicopter. Any parting gifts to our audience?
I mean, I think you really touched on it. If you have a passion for the aviation industry, reach out, connect with other people, network, and I have yet to meet a bad person in the aviation industry. I mean, just everybody's so helpful and willing to, go the extra mile to set time aside, to, hey, check out my fixed wing, my Cessna or whatever, or my helicopter. It's just everybody's been phenomenal. So it's definitely a great industry to be involved in and get involved in the local aviation community if you can. I love everything about it, and I'm very much looking forward to growing and keep going. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's an important note. Is the aviation community is cool, and the thing, and I'm sure there's other industries out there like it. But the cool thing about helicopters and all aviation, but helicopters is what I'm used to, of course, is that no matter who you are, no matter what life path you've had, whether you're a male or a female, or you come from a poor family or a rich family, none of it matters, because at the end of the day, we all fly helicopters. We all have that mutual connection. Whereas like in real life, trying to connect with other humans and develop friendships, it's like kind of hard because you don't necessarily have common interests, or maybe you like to ski and that person likes to ski, but they don't like to do this or that. But in helicopters, you could go and sit down at a bar, never meeting this person before, and you could be best friends by the end of the night just by talking about helicopters. Yeah, because we all share that same flame, that same desire, that same excitement. And that's why I think people have a willingness within the industry to provide support, to be mentors, to give guidance, to do podcasts, whatever it may be. You may run into some bad apples here and there, but by and large, it's a really awesome industry. And I appreciate you saying that, because it's cool and you're new to it. So welcome to the family. You're officially a certificate of pilot, so you're part of that family now. And I think it's really cool. And I'm so excited to keep in touch with you, hear about what you're doing. Your path is different. You've taken a very different path already, and it seems like you're not going to have that normal trajectory. And I think that's okay. I think so many times we think that we have to live in a box and we have to do it step by step by step by step. And you're not doing that. And I think that's neat. And I think it's a good example that it's okay to do things a little bit differently. So Chris, thank you for joining. To our listeners, thank you for listening. Please make sure that you continue to follow along. We release new episodes, Chris, for your information, every Tuesday. I haven't missed a Tuesday for almost a year. In March, I think, is when I started kind of doing podcasting again. And to that point, I haven't missed a day yet, or Tuesday release yet. So please keep listening. Some really exciting episodes on the horizon. We've had a great start to 2024. Chris, this was an awesome episode. To our partners over at MHM Publishing and Vertical Helicast, what can I say? I love being a part of the team and the family at MHM. If you haven't checked out the Hangar Z podcast with John Gray, law enforcement specific, John has a long history of flying in law enforcement. Super cool. And then if you haven't checked out The Real Rescue with Jason Quinn, a.k.a. Quinny, I highly recommend it. Number 500 for Coast Guard swimmers. He has a ton of cool guests on. So just feel totally awesome to be a part of those great podcasts. So thank you for listening. Chris, thanks for being on, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks a lot for having me. I appreciate it.
See you, buddy.
Take care.
Hey, podcast listeners. My name is Halsey Schider, and I'm the principal broker and owner of Helicopter. Helicopter is a new age, data-driven, helicopter-specific sales brokerage, bringing helicopter listings to new heights. At Helicopter, we utilize digital positioning, paid advertising, and our large network of industry professionals to move your helicopter quickly and efficiently. Unsure the value of your helicopter? Lucky for you, Helicopter offers a complimentary market evaluation. All you have to do is contact the team today. Are you ready to take your helicopter listing from Mayday to payday? Easy. Fill out the contact information below, and a Helicopter pilot agent will reach out shortly. Helicopter. List it, sell it, done.